There are multiple reports of Israeli armored vehicles, including at least one tank spotted on the outskirts of Gaza City.
We have expanded our activity. This is armor activity, infantry activity, offensive activity that is expanding in the Gaza Strip in order to meet the two goals we received for the war. One, to collapse Hamas, and the other, to bring home the hostages.
This video, posted online and verified by the BBC, is said to show that tank that I mentioned. It's on the territory's main north-south road link. And while it's difficult to see, you can clearly make out a plume of black smoke in the distance and a car trying to turn around. Then there's an explosion. We don't see what happened to the car as the vehicle carrying the photographer speeds off. Israel's military says its ground operation is going to plan and more troops have been sent to Gaza. All this happening as Hamas releases new video of 3 hostages it claims to be holding. For more on Israel's ground offensive in Gaza, we're joined by Raphael Cohen. He is a senior political scientist at RAND Corporation and an Iraq War veteran, and he joins us live in Washington. Rafi, thank you for speaking to us today. Appreciate this.
Thank you for having me.
So as Israeli forces move deeper into the Gaza Strip, what are the challenges around fighting in such an urban area?
So Israel faces, I would call, 3 big challenges here. First off, they face a humanitarian/civilian problem. Gaza is one of the most densely populated cities on the face of the globe, with approximately 2.2 to 2.3 million people crowded into an area roughly the size of Philadelphia. Now, while Israel has tried to move in this sort of ham-fisted manner all the civilian population out of the northern part of the Gaza Strip, there are going to be civilians that remain. And so deciphering between civilians and Hamas militants is going to prove a challenge. The second challenge, which you alluded to in your intro clip, is they have a hostage problem. Now, there are between 230 plus hostages still in Hamas custody. Now, in order to rescue those hostages, like the private who was just rescued just last night, that requires very exquisite intelligence, very highly trained soldiers, and that's particularly hard to do as the situation on the ground becomes more chaotic. And then the third challenge here, which has been talked about a lot in the media, is a tunnel problem. Ever since Israel's ground war in 2008-2009, Operation Cast Lead, Hamas has invested in an extensive subterranean network that extends throughout the Gaza Strip. Yahya Sinwar, the head of Hamas in Gaza, said in a 2021 interview that it's 500 kilometers worth of tunnels. Now, take that with a grain of salt, but nonetheless, it's an extensive network, and fighting underneath the ground poses inherent challenges to any military, including the Israelis.
I just want to ask you a little bit more about the hostages because we know that the IDF we heard from the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, that this soldier was rescued. And Netanyahu said Hamas will not release hostages unless they are under pressure. So this method stands a chance. In other words, the expansion of this ground operation, that this is the kind of pressure that is needed. Do you agree with that assessment in terms of more hostages potentially being released?
Well, I think the statement is a little bit less nuanced than I would have made it. And let me explain why. So Hamas has said that they were open to releasing something on the order of 50-odd hostages through negotiations. Those were primarily women, children, the elderly, hostages with a dual passport. Now, that's a large portion of the hostages, but it's not all of them. There are, as I mentioned before, upwards of 230 hostages still in Hamas custody. And for those remaining hostages, what Hamas wanted to do was exchange those hostages for Palestinian and other militants currently in Israeli custody, upwards of 6,000 militants, at least according to news accounts. Israel's loath to make that kind of deal. They made such a deal. In fact, Prime Minister Netanyahu made such a deal in 2011 when they exchanged one Israeli soldier for over 1,000 Palestinian militants, some of whom have since, at least according to Israel, returned to the battlefield and killed Israelis. So Israel's loath to make that kind of exchange here. And that's in turn what's, I think, driving Prime Minister Netanyahu's statement that the best way to bring those hostages home is through military means.
What about the civilians in terms of, you talked about the challenges of civilians, of Hamas blending in with the population. The Israeli government has said that they use civilians as human shields, that it's very difficult, and that Hamas is choosing to not allow people in Gaza City to go to the south, and that if they did allow that, then no civilians would be harmed. What do you make of that?
So, like most things, the truth is somewhere in between. Israel had released footage of Hamas checkpoints controlling movement southwards of civilians, and that's true in one respect. There are, however, a portion of the population in northern Gaza that probably couldn't flee even if they wanted to. Think some of the people getting treated at the hospitals, for instance, or extreme elderly or the like. Moving 1 million plus people from the north of Gaza to the south of Gaza, that would be difficult under any circumstances, particularly under continuous air bombardment, which Gaza has been under. So while it is true in all likelihood that Hamas is inhibiting the free flow of civilians to the south, the truth is a little bit more complex than I think that statement lets on.
For Palestinians displaced in Gaza during the past 3 weeks, their existence can feel precarious. They're enduring bombardments, a lack of relief supplies, and a healthcare system on the verge of collapse. We have the latest on the situation now from reporter Akram Al-Satiri in southern Gaza.
Gaza has been living its 23rd day of heavy bombardment and widespread destruction. According to the Palestinian Minister of Health, around 10,000 Palestinians either killed or missed under the rubble of their homes. The Palestinian Civil Defense, the Palestinian Minister of Health, the Palestinian Red Crescent Society, and some other family members of the people who are under the rubble are trying their best to remove the debris and to retrieve either the body or their beloved ones who are still alive but struggling to survive. Yesterday, the day before, there were some cases that were retrieved from under the rubble and they were still alive despite their very critical injuries and despite the very critical situation under the rubble. According to the Palestinian sources, the number of nationals who are Western nationals and who are waiting to leave the Gaza Strip, we have around 400 Canadians, we have around 3,000 to 4,000 nationals from other Western countries, from Holland, from Spain, from USA, and from Germany as well. They're waiting at the border a few days ago, but they are no longer waiting at the border. I spoke to some of them. They are waiting for the moment they would be informed and asked to leave Gaza. Some of them lost their properties and assets. Some of them lost their apartments, and some of them brought some of their relatives and family in the Gaza Strip. And they have been living such a horrifying conditions. They were waiting for any news about any humanitarian ceasefire or a humanitarian passage that would allow them to move from Gaza outside of the Gaza Strip. In the meantime, the situation of the humanitarian aid flowing into Gaza is still very poor. Palestinians said they have received so far 88 truckloads, while Gaza needs, and hold this time, while Gaza needs an ordinary time, around 100. The minimum is 100 truckloads of very basic humanitarian supplies that would meet the increasing need of the Palestinians who are already living in makeshift camps and living in host communities and living in the open area. In the Gaza South now, there is around 1.4 million Palestinians who are already IDPs with increasing need to food supplies, water supplies, energy supplies, food supplies, and with almost nothing to cater to that need or nothing to accommodate that need. The situation in Gaza Strip is still very critical. The bombardment is still continuous. People are still falling injured or killed because of the ongoing bombardment, and also the buildings are no longer safe. People in Gaza see that there is no place that can be called a safe haven for them, and they hope they would survive amidst the growing concerns of death and destruction.